Hello guys, welcome back, and today I'm going to be grading every NHL team's season so far. Now, as we head into the NHL All-Star break, every single team in the NHL has a chance to reflect on their season so far to see how well they performed. So which teams deserve a high grade for their seasons, and which teams deserve a low grade for their seasons so far. And in this video, I'll be going through every single NHL team, assigning them an A, B, C, D, or F rating on how their first half has gone this season. But we're not even going to waste any time, let's get right into it. And to start out, we have the Anaheim Ducks, and for their season so far, I'm going to give them a D rating. So far this season, they're at a 21-21-9 record. They have 51 points in the season. John Gibson has been an absolute beast, and he's the only reason why they're in a playoffs or a playoff race right now. And for the Anaheim Ducks, I didn't expect them to make the playoffs. They've been pretty average. They've had some bad injuries. They're starting to finally get healthy, and then Andre Kasha gets injured, so it's been kind of a back and forth season for the Anaheim Ducks, but one that is going to kind of be forgotten. Now, the next team is the Arizona Coyotes. I gave them a C- grade. So far, they are at a 23-23-4 record. They have 50 points on the season so far. The first half has been okay for the Arizona Coyotes, but it wasn't really what I expected from them. Going into the season, I predicted them to make the playoffs, just barely, but to make the playoffs. And with the Arizona Coyotes, this season has been a little bit rough. You've had some injuries there, but overall, it hasn't been the best for them. Next up, I have the Boston Bruins, and for my grade, I gave them a straight B. So far, they're at a 27-17-5 record. They have 59 points on the season so far. And for Boston, it's been a pretty up and down season for them. They've had some hot spots, they've had some cold streaks, but it's mostly been a pretty injured year for them. They've had a lot of guys go on IR, a lot of key guys go on the injured reserve. And for the Boston Bruins, I'm still surprised at their record so far and how well they've been able to do with how many injuries they've had so far. And that alone, I think, is impressive. Next up is the Buffalo Sabres, and I gave them a B+ rating. They're right now at a 24-18-6 record. Currently, they have 54 points on the season, and I gave them a B+, mostly because they're playing pretty solidly right now. They're in a playoff race still, and even though they were looking very good and then they started to drop off, the Buffalo Sabres, I am still proud of how well they've done this season as a whole, and while they have been cold in the last month, I'm still been impressed with that 10-game winning streak and what they were able to do in that run. And for the Buffalo Sabres, the future is bright, and we're starting to see that this season. Next up is the Calgary Flames, and I gave Calgary a A+ rating. So far this season, they've been absolutely phenomenal, getting a 33-13-5 record. Currently, they have 71 points on the standings, and it's been an amazing year so far for Calgary. Guys like David Rittich have been surprisingly good, and they haven't even needed James Neal. Guys like Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, Elias Lindholm, they're getting it done, and the guys on the back end like Brody, guys like Giordano, all of it is really clicking right now for the Calgary Flames, and it's amazing to see that team get off to quite a hot start. And so far this first half, I don't think it could have gone much better for Calgary, and the expectations, for me at least, were completely shattered. Next up is the Carolina Hurricanes. I gave them a C+ rating. So far, they've gotten 24-20-6 record. They've gotten 54 points on the season so far, and it's been decent for Carolina. In the last few weeks, they've been playing a lot better. They used to be below 500, but it's been a lot better for Carolina now, and the team is starting to get hot in the second half, and as we get into that second half, Carolina could be a team competing for the playoffs and for that playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. So Carolina has been quite impressive for me. Guys like Nino Niederreiter are starting to gel. So while it hasn't been an amazing first half for them, it has been pretty solid, and hopefully they translate that into the second half. Next up is the Chicago Blackhawks, and they're the first team in this video to get an F rating. So far, they're at an 18-24-9 record, getting 45 points in the season. And for me personally, I thought Chicago was going to be middle of the pack. I didn't see them making the playoffs, but I saw them maybe being competitive for a little bit of a stretch. They looked pretty solid to start out the season. They looked like they would be on fire. Guys like Taves and Kane were rejuvenated, and they still are. But for the Chicago Blackhawks, the same old things have plagued them now. And for the Chicago Blackhawks, it will be two straight years of them missing the playoffs. And I predicted that Chicago to be bad, so it isn't necessarily a surprise they're in the bottom of the barrel, but the season so far has still been a failure for them. Next up is the Colorado Avalanche. I gave them a C- rating. So far, they're at a 22-20-8 record. And right now, they have 52 points in the standings. And for Colorado, they got off to a pretty solid start. It was looking like they might be a pretty competitive team in the top 3 of the Central. But as the last few weeks have come by, it has been a pretty rough go of things for the Colorado Avalanche. Guys like Mikko Rantanen have completely slowed down. The first line is still producing, but not at the elite rate it was earlier. And the depth is still not getting it done. The defense is pretty atrocious, and the goaltending, especially Grubauer, has not been up to snuff. So for the Colorado Avalanche, they still have a winning record. It is still decent, but I think if they want to make the playoffs right now, it's just not cutting it. Next up is the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I gave them a straight B rating. They're at a 28-17-3 record. So far, they've gotten 59 points on the season. And for Columbus, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride for them. They had that whole Sergei Bobrovsky incident. They still need to figure out what they're going to do with Sergei Bobrovsky and Artemi Panarin. So that has been looming on their season, but guys like Atkinson have really stepped up. There's been quite a few guys in the depth that have really done well, and the goaltending is still getting it done. It still is a pretty solid team, and for Columbus, I still see themselves as a cup contender if they do keep Bobrovsky and Panarin, but right now, that situation is still looming over the team. Next up is the Dallas Stars, my favorite team in the NHL, and I gave them a C- rating for their season so far. So far, they're at a 24-21-3-4 record. They're at 52 points in the season so far, the same as the Colorado Avalanche. And this season, so far, has been a little bit of a disappointment. The forwards are still not getting it done, at least most of them. The defense and the goaltending has been surprisingly solid, and they've kept us in a lot of games, but the forwards have been starting to keep up a little bit more, and hopefully we see a lot more consistency in the second half than we did in the first half, because with the Dallas Stars, if they're one thing, it's inconsistent, and we saw that so far in the first half. Next up is the Detroit Red Wings. I gave them a straight D rating. So far, they're at a 19-25-7 record, getting 45 points on the season so far. And if you guys checked out my predictions before the season, you know that I predict Detroit to be the worst team in the league. And so far, they're not far from being that, but with Detroit, they've had some good goaltending. Guys like Howard have really played well for them. And Belarkin has been a big star for Detroit. And for Detroit, they still have the same problems. The depth isn't really all that great. The defense is still pretty trash, and some of the goaltending depth is not that great. So for Detroit, they still have some big holes, but with this current rebuild in Detroit, they're getting a lot of prospects, they're getting a lot of picks, so that'll probably be fixed soon enough. With Detroit, it has been a pretty bad season, and I kind of came to expect that anyways. Next up is the Edmonton Oilers. I gave them a D rating for their season so far. So far, they're at a 23-24-3 record, getting 49 points on the season. And it's been a roller coaster ride so far for them, especially in that first half. There was a lot of things to happen. McClellan was fired, Hitchcock was hired, and then it didn't really get too much better. Of course, Peter Shirley was fired as the GM, and then they get Keith Gretzky, and all of that situation. And for the Edmonton Oilers, it's been anything but boring for them. The team has been exciting, but also failing at the same time. So with the Edmonton Oilers, we'll likely see a more consistent second half. And for Oilers fans, I sure hope so, because that first half was pretty disastrous. Next up is the Florida Panthers, and so far I gave them a C- rating. They're at a 20-20-8 record so far, getting 48 points on the season. And for Florida, I'm honestly not surprised that they ended up failing in the first half once again. It seems like every single year with the Florida Panthers, it is a first half failure, and then in the second half, they just blow up and be competitive in the playoffs. I honestly just don't understand the Florida Panthers. I mean, they had a pretty solid team on paper. The defense has been a little bit rough. The goaltending has not been where it has needed to be, as it always is. The forward group is still getting it done. That Trocheck injury was pretty rough for them. But for the Florida Panthers, again, it's another first half failure, and for that, I couldn't give them a better rating than a C-. Next up is the LA Kings, and they are the next team to get an F rating in this video. They're at a 20-26-4 record, so far getting 44 points on the season. And it has not been good for the LA Kings. They've been starting to get a little bit better, but it still has not been where it has needed to be. They got off to that atrocious start. They ended up firing John Stevens, hiring Willie Desjardins, but that didn't really do too much for them. This team has a lot of problems. The goaltending has been solid for them, but pretty much everything else has been bad for them. But for the LA Kings, they had some expectations going into the season. I personally did not see them making the playoffs, but I saw them being a little bit competitive. But for the people that that expected them to make the playoffs, I'm feeling the most sorry for, because that prediction is not looking good right now. Next up is the Minnesota Wild. I gave them a B- rating for their season so far. So far, they've had a 26, 21, and 3 record, getting 55 points on the season so far. And it has not been the most pretty season for Minnesota, but they've been able to get it done so far. Right now, they're currently 3rd in the Central Division, and they've been winning over some decent teams. They just won versus Winnipeg, and right now, they're looking pretty solid. And once they had that Matt Dumba injury, I thought it would be over for them, but they've been able to adapt since then, and they've been a lot better since then, really proving themselves as a playoff contender and to get into the playoffs. Right now, it's looking pretty good for them. Next up is the Montreal Canadiens. I gave them a straight A rating. So far, they're at a 28, 18, and 5 record, getting 61 points on the season. And for the Montreal Canadiens, it's been a very impressive season for them. They started off pretty solid. I always waited until they started to fall down, but so far it hasn't happened. For the Montreal Canadiens, they've been a pretty weird team. They've been the opposite of consistent. Their offense has been very, very solid. The defense has been a lot better as of late. The goaltending, again, Carey Price has been starting to find his game. And for the Montreal Canadiens, I think right now they're playing some of their best hockey at the right time. And while it's not heading into the playoffs, right now they're 1 point behind the Toronto Maple Leafs. So they're getting stuff done and they're getting wins, which for me, I really didn't expect heading into the season. The next team is the Nashville Predators. So far, I gave them a B grade. They're at a 30, 18, and 4 record so far, getting 64 points on the season. And for Nashville, it's been a pretty weird season for them. They've had some big injuries. That's been a reason why they've been losing as of late. For the Nashville Predators, they're starting to get a little more healthy. Some guys are starting to get a little more consistent. But for the Nashville Predators, they still are a pretty solid team. And while the record is decent, I feel like it can be better. But because of those injuries, they have been kind of held back so far this season. But we'll likely see them resurge back in the second half. The next team is the New Jersey Devils, and I gave them a D- rating for their season so far. They're currently at an 18, 23, and 7 record, getting 43 points in the season so far. And for me personally, I saw the New Jersey Devils missing the playoffs. I saw last year as a little bit of a fluke, and so far it definitely was. For the New Jersey Devils, guys like Taylor Hall have been injured for parts of the season, and the goaltending has been absolutely atrocious. Both Kincaid and Corey Schneider have been terrible so far, and while Kincaid pretty much carried them so far last season, it just has not been the same so far this season. And for the defense, it's been rough. The offense has not been all that great. And for the New Jersey Devils, it's combined into a pretty forgettable year for them, and one that they'll likely spend tanking for Hughes. Next team is the New York Islanders, and I'm going to give them an A+ rating for their season so far. Currently, they're at a 29, 15, and 5 record, getting 63 points in the season so far, and this start for them has been about as good as anybody in an organization could have hoped for. Going into the season, I predicted the Islanders to get 71 points, and right now, they're 8 points out from crushing my prediction, and we're only beginning the second half of the season, so the Islanders have been very, very impressive for what they've been able to do so far this season. The start was a little bit more fluky, but they've been starting to prove themselves, and they've been really paybacking John Tavares for skipping out on them and leaving for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Next up is the other New York team, and it has not gone as well for them. And for the New York Rangers, I gave them a C+ rating. So far, they're at a 21, 20, and 7 record, 49 points in the season. And this season has been pretty standard for the New York Rangers. They've been right around where I expected for them. Not really amazing, but not really bad at the same time. And for the New York Rangers, they still are in that rebuild, so it's not a win or a loss for them either way. But for the New York Rangers, they have a lot of picks for this season. This season is not looked as one that they're really going to compete. They did compete earlier in the season, but it has calmed down a little bit for them. But in the first half, it has still been pretty successful. Some of the younger guys have played very, very well. So for the New York Rangers, they are still in that rebuild, so the expectations are still low for them. Next up is the Ottawa Senators, and I gave them a D rating for their season so far, and so far they've gotten a 19, 26, and 5 record, getting 43 points on the season. And for the Ottawa Senators, they're tied for last place in the league, which pretty much everybody expected. I expected them to be a little bit better than people expected, but even then, they have still not been all that great. The team is not all that great on paper, and they're pretty much living up to the expectations, which were pretty much zero heading into the season. The next team is the Philadelphia Flyers. I gave them a D- grade for their season so far. Currently, they have a 19-23-6 record, getting 44 points on the season, and it has not been a good year for them. Even though Carter Hart has came in and played very, very well for them, pretty much the whole team has been crumbling around him, and even though you got that Carter Hart story, it has not been great for them. And this year, while Philadelphia still has a pretty solid future, I think this is one of those years where you just pack up and say, hey, we'll make the playoffs next year, right? Next up is the Pittsburgh Penguins. I give them a B grade for their season so far. Currently, they're at a 26-16-6 record. They have 58 points on the season so far. And for the Pittsburgh Penguins, it's been one weird year for them. It's been up and down. There was points where maybe they would miss the playoffs, maybe they would not. But for the Penguins, they've been a lot more consistent lately. They've been a lot more better lately. The goaltending has been solid. Casey Smith has been really, really good. But for the Pittsburgh Penguins, they're starting to find their gel. They're starting to find their chemistry right at the right time, and whenever we start to doubt the Pittsburgh Penguins, they always come right back and make the playoffs, so it's no surprise that they are playing better, and overall in the first half, it was pretty solid for them. Next up is the San Jose Sharks. I'm going to give them a B grade for their season so far. Currently, they have a 29-16-7 record, getting 65 points in the season, and that's a pretty solid one. And the reason I gave them a B is because I went into the season expecting them to to win the President's Trophy, and right now they still have a decent record, but they are not going to win that over Tampa right now. I don't think anybody is. But with the San Jose Sharks, they still have a decent season. The defense and goaltending has been starting to crumble again. Going into the season, I expected Martin Jones to be very, very good, and he has not been up to snuff. So for the San Jose Sharks, they have some strengths, they have some weaknesses, but overall, it has been a pretty solid season for them, and one that has been pretty entertaining too. The next team is the St. Louis Blues, and I'm going to give them a D grade for their season so far. It has not been good, but it's been getting slowly better for them. Currently, they're at a 22-22-5 record, getting 49 points in the season. And for St. Louis, they were down the dumpster for quite a while. It was not looking good for them whatsoever, but right now, having a 500 record, they're currently in the playoff race in the Western Conference because that Western Conference is not all that great. But for the St. Louis Blues, it has been getting better as of late. Guys like Tarasenko starting to finally perform, and for the St. Louis Blues, it has been looking better, and even though they have failed their expectations, they are starting to finally get into that playoff race, which is good for them. Next up is the Tampa Bay Lightning. I gave them an A grade for their season so far. Currently, they have a 37-10-2 record, getting 76 points on the season. And for the Tampa Bay Lightning, it has been very good. And I think everybody expected that from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Right now, they're coming away with the President's Trophy race. But for the Tampa Bay Lightning, it has been a very good year for them. It has been a very solid year. And of course, being the President's Trophy winners, at least right now, it has been a very good season. But for the Tampa Bay Lightning, I didn't give them an A+, mostly because I pretty much expected this from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Even though I expected the Toronto Maple Leafs to have the more points this season, the Tampa Bay Lightning, being the President's Trophy winner, or at least a leader right now, is not really surprising. So I could have given them an A+, but I'm going to settle with an A, mostly because I expected this from them going into the season. The next team is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'm going to give the Maple Leafs a B+ rating for their season so far. Currently, they're at a 3-17-2 record, getting 62 points on the season. And for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they started off amazing, but in the last couple of months, it has been a little bit rough for them. It hasn't been as pretty as the Maple Leafs fans have expected. But for the Toronto Maple Leafs, I still see them as a very solid team. In the last few weeks, they have been exposed a little bit when it comes to that defense. Some of the offense has run dry. But for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they're starting to get a little bit better now, and hopefully we see them start to win a lot more, because that Toronto Maple Leafs team is too good to not be better than this. Next up is the Vancouver Canucks, and I'm going to give them a B+ rating for their season. And right now they're at a 23-22-6 record, getting 52 points on the season so far. And it's been a very solid season for Vancouver so far, even though they're just one game over 500. They are in that playoff race. Elias Pettersson has been absolutely amazing, and guys like Jacob Markstrom have played well. Guys like Alex Edler have played well. And for the Vancouver Canucks, they're not a great team on paper, but they are getting a get done enough to be in that playoff race, which for Vancouver Canucks in January is something that I certainly never expected. And for the Vancouver Canucks, it is a nice change of scenery because we usually see them in the bottom of the dumpster, but now with all this youth and now with all these great players, they're starting to finally rise up, which is about time, and definitely thankful for those Vancouver Canucks fans. The next team is the Vegas Golden Knights, and for them, I'm going to give them a B+ rating. They're at a 29-19-4 record. They currently have 62 points on the season, and that ain't bad whatsoever. And for the Vegas Golden Knights, they started off quite a bit slow. It seemed like maybe the second season would be a little bit more of a rough season for them than the inaugural one. But as the season went on, in the last couple of months, Vegas has been a lot more hot, they've been a lot more consistent, and we've been seeing a lot more better play from them, which for me, Vegas is my third favorite team. Most of you guys know that. So it is really good to see Vegas start to really perform now and start to get a lot better. And for Vegas, they're starting to play a little bit more to where they played last season, which is very impressive. And for the Vegas Golden Knights, overall, they haven't really skipped a beat from last season, which is certainly impressive for an expansion team. Next up is the Washington Capitals, and I'm going to give them a B rating for their season so far. Currently, they have a 27-17-6 record, getting 60 points on the season. But for the Washington Capitals, as of late, it has not been good. They're currently on a 7-game losing streak as I'm recording this, but as a whole, it has been pretty solid for them. It has been a pretty good season after their cup win. But with the Washington Capitals, right now they're on a pretty bad losing streak. We'll probably see them get past that in the second half, but right now there is cause of concern for Washington, and even though Alex Ovechkin is still playing well, the team around him is not really clicking right now, but it likely will start to get going into the second half. Now, last but not least, I have the Winnipeg Jets, and for them, I'm going to give them a straight B of grading. They're currently at a 31-15-2 record, getting 64 points on the season, and it has been a good season for Winnipeg, though I did expect a little bit better from them. The Central Division is kind of weak this year compared to years past, but with the Winnipeg Jets, they still are a pretty solid team. They've been really hot as of late, especially in the last couple of weeks, so for the Winnipeg Jets, they have a lot of solid strengths, and while the goaltending right now, Laurent Brossoit is kind of the starter for them right now. As a whole, Winnipeg has been pretty impressive. But as I said before, with all 31 NHL teams, this is a good spot of the season to reflect on how things have been going. Some teams have been really impressive, some teams have not. But with the NHL teams and what's happening so far with the All-Star break, it is a good time to look back and reflect on the season so far. And of course, the first half for a lot of teams was very entertaining. And of course, we got to see a lot of great games and a lot of great goals. And on to the second half, and we'll likely see a lot of great comebacks, some great teams maybe playing better, and of course, some of the great teams falling a little bit. But the second half is sure to be a lot of fun, and the first half definitely did not disappoint. But of course, with this video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So let me know, what do you think about my grades so far with all 31 teams? What would your grades be? Which teams would get A's? Which teams would get F's? And of course, for everything in between, which teams do you think deserve these grades? But if you guys want some more grab videos just like this one, you can click on this card right here to watch my video about the NHL teams and heading into the trade deadline, which teams will be sellers. But that is going for it, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. And comment down below your thoughts on my grades and what your grades would be. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.